I'm Lyra. And yeah, my dad forced me into law school. He said art was a joke, a phase, something I'd thank him for giving up. But while I was filing motions and memorizing statutes, I was also painting in secret. By day, I argued in court. By night, I sold canvases for thousands, until one of them ended up hanging in my law firm, and no one knew it was mine. But what happens when your double life isn't just discovered, it's betrayed? By someone in your own family? And when the man who silenced your dreams? The win that didn't feel like one. They say winning feels like champagne, fireworks, justice. It didn't feel like anything. I stood in a downtown Seattle courtroom, accepting congratulations like a robot in heels. Smiles, handshakes, pats on the back. Another clean win for Ren, someone joked. I smiled. Cold, perfect. Glassy, uncracked. Inside, I felt nothing. We'd just won a huge corporate liability case, the kind that lands headlines and padded invoices. But all I felt was a numb, aching quiet. No pride, no joy, just silence. The hum of fluorescent lights, the scrape of chairs, my heels clicking on marble as I left. The elevator ride down was still. Outside the glass, the city moved. Umbrellas, coffee cups, rush hour blurs. And I wondered, not for the first time, who I could have been if I hadn't become this. Not Lyra Wren, legal prodigy. Not Judge Wren's daughter. Just Lyra. But that version of me had been killed years ago, silently, without a fight. The courtroom wasn't justice. It was a cage, polished, prestigious, but a cage all the same. Back in my office, I stared at my framed degrees. University of Washington, Yale Law, honors, my name engraved on plaques. Once, I thought they mattered. Now they felt like tombstones, markers of the girl I used to be. I never chose this path. I complied. I performed. Because in a family like mine, where both parents are legal giants, deviation is disobedience. I remember when I tried. I was 17 when CalArts offered me a full scholarship. I'd been accepted into their visual arts program, one of the youngest in the country. I came home clutching that letter like a lifeline. Dad was reading the Wall Street Journal. Mom was grading papers. I got in, I said. He didn't look up. Into what? California Institute of the Arts, full ride. They said I was one of their top applicants. He finally took the letter, read it, then tore it in half. Clean, slow. Mom didn't flinch. We don't raise daydreamers, he said. Art isn't a career. It's a phase, or a fast track to failure. Then he walked out. Just like that, my future, ripped apart in his hands. I didn't argue. I folded. Enrolled in pre-law at UW. Burned my sketchbooks. Buried my dreams. But something small survived. A flicker that whispered, "You're more than this." That whisper turned into a scream the day I overheard my supervisor outside my office. She was next in line, he said, but someone in her family stepped in, quietly advised against it. Said she was unstable, too distracted. I knew who he meant. My father, still pulling strings, still deciding which doors I was allowed to walk through. The betrayal cracked something in me. I didn't confront him. He'd just spin it as concern. That's how men like him disguise control as love. That night, I drove. Across the bridge. To a warehouse only I knew about. My secret studio. Inside, the smell of paint and turpentine hit me like oxygen. I pulled the cloth off a half-finished piece. It was raw, untamed, real. I dipped my brush in crimson, not paint, but anger, and began again. The day my secret life was hung on a wall. Every brush stroke came from more than just color. It came from everything I'd never said. From every line my father crossed, every silence my mother kept. From every truth I buried beneath court winds, designer heels, and emotionless smiles. I painted until my arms went numb, until my chest stopped hurting, until I could breathe again. By sunrise, the light bled through cracked warehouse windows. My hands were stained red, gold, violet. I didn't clean up. I just stared at the canvas. Messy, raw, honest. For once, it reflected what I actually felt. Then I did what I always do. I washed my hands, pulled my hair into a tight bun, changed into a navy pantsuit, covered the exhaustion under my eyes, became the version of myself the world expects. At Ravenhill Law Group, the morning smelled like espresso and tension. I got in early, less noise, fewer questions. My assistant, Josh, glanced up as I passed. "Morning, did you see the new art in reception?" I paused. "New art?" He nodded. "Yeah, came in late yesterday. Donated by some anonymous client. Abstract, kinda intense." My stomach dropped. "What does it look like?" He shrugged. "Big. Moody. Like someone had a lot going on." I walked off before I could ask more, heels echoing down the hall, heartbeat racing. It couldn't be. No way. But when I turned the corner into the main lobby, I stopped cold. There it was. Veil of the Unspoken. My painting. Hung right beneath the firm's logo, framed between photos of the founding partners and a marble statue of Lady Justice. No one else knew. No one could possibly recognize it. But I did. I knew every line, every buried symbol, every uneven brushstroke. It was mine. Signed, Aurora Knight. I felt like I was staring at a secret weapon, one made from my own heart. And now, it was out in the open. No one batted an eye. The receptionist sipped her latte. 2 interns whispered about a deposition. Business as usual. But it wasn't usual. It was either a coincidence or a warning. I stepped closer. There it was. The flaw I'd always meant to fix. That sharp twist in the center. Silas had picked it up before I could finish. He'd sold it at auction last month. I never asked who bought it. Now I knew. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to my parents' house. Dinner was perfect. Rosemary chicken, wild rice, silence dressed in civility. The kind of meal where nothing is said and everything is implied. After dessert, my mother noticed something sticking out of my tote bag. A folded flyer from a gallery show. She pulled it out before I could stop her. Her eyes scanned the design, then landed on me. "This looks familiar." I smiled like I'd rehearsed it. "Just a modern art exhibit I walked by. Thought it looked cool." She said nothing, just stared. Long, quiet. That's her way. She doesn't accuse. She lets silence bruise you instead. We didn't talk about it again, but the air between us turned colder than the wine she didn't finish. Later, back home, I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The day had undone me, piece by piece. The painting, the way my mother looked at me. And then, my phone buzzed. It was Silas. "Aurora's next piece is getting attention. A reporter asked if there's a legal world connection. Be careful." My chest tightened. Not from fear, but something heavier. Dread. I didn't respond. Just stared at the screen. The life I'd built in secret was cracking open, and the people who taught me to hide? They might be the first to expose me. The walls weren't just closing in. They were turning into mirrors. And everywhere I turned, I caught my own reflection staring back like a threat. I knew it the moment I stepped into the Ravenhill Auditorium for our annual internal legal debate. Everyone was watching me just a second too long, their curiosity dressed in polite grins and 2 casual glances. Something in the air felt off, lighter on the surface, tighter underneath. I had been paired against Clara Red, a junior partner with a jawline sharp enough to slice through glass, and a personality even colder. She always smiled with her mouth, never her eyes. And she was always watching. The topic was dry, statutory interpretation in wrongful termination cases, but I saw an opportunity, a way to shift the usual lifeless back and forth. Maybe a sliver of rebellion through creativity. Maybe a test. Could I bring a piece of the real me into this sterile world? When it was my turn, I stood up straight, ignored the knot in my stomach, and began. My voice was steady. I'd like to propose we consider this not just through legal precedents, but through visual perspective. Think of a courtroom as a canvas. A few heads tilted. Clara raised an eyebrow. Where each side presents not only facts, but perception, color, contrast, scale. Law is logic, yes, but it's also how the human eye. Excuse me? A voice cut through. It was Harvey Dunn, one of the firm's founders, and, more importantly, my father's longtime friend. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. His tone wasn't harsh, but it didn't have to be. This is a courtroom, not a canvas, Ms. Wren. There was a flicker of amusement in the room. A few people smiled. Clara didn't smile. She smirked. I held my ground. With respect, Mr. Dunn, the law is about interpretation, how we present arguments, how we frame narratives. It's— Spare us the poetic flair, he said, louder this time. We deal in fact, not feelings. Leave the metaphors for the artists. My chest burned. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, could hear the silence wrap around me like a noose. Clara turned to the crowd and said just loud enough, "Next, she'll bring in finger painting for closing arguments." There was laughter, software, cruel. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat locked, my hands trembled at my sides. "Thank you, Ms. Wren," Harvey said, waving dismissively. "Let's proceed." And that was it. My turn was over. I stood there for a second too long before returning to my seat. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Every eye in the room avoided mine after that. I barely heard the rest of the debate. The clapping at the end was faint. I knew Clara had won before the verdict was even delivered. The applause for her was full and crisp. Mine was a courtesy, nothing more than a slow, quiet burial. On my way out, I passed Harvey in the hall. He gave me a pat on the shoulder. "Stick to what you're good at, Lyra," he said. "Leave the art for your weekend hobbies." I smiled like a good girl, like the one I used to be, the one who stayed silent when her dreams were torn in half over dinner. But inside, something cracked. In the restroom, I locked the door and gripped the edges of the sink. You let them do it again. That same voice from years ago, the one I'd buried under 1,000 court cases and committee meetings. You let them mock you. You stood there and took it. I stared into the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. My father's voice replayed in my head, low and heavy. "Stop trying to be special. Just be good." Back then, I believed him. But this time, I didn't cry. I walked out, got in my car, and drove. Not home, not to anyone, to the studio. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew the space like my own skin. I moved toward the canvas without thinking. No music, no distractions. Just the pounding of my heart and the memory of Clara's smirk. I reached for a brush, dipped it in charcoal gray, then deep red. I painted a courtroom, but it wasn't one anyone would recognize. It was bent and distorted, with faceless judges and a bleeding scale that leaned toward power, not truth. And in the center, a woman without a mouth. I wasn't wrong. I was just in the wrong place to be right. I left the studio after dawn, drained but still wired. My mind spun in 1,000 directions as I drove back across the bridge. The silence in the car was loud, filled with Clara's voice echoing in my head, the patronizing applause, and that canvas, still wet, still screaming. By the time I walked into Ravenhill, I had perfected my face again. Clean, composed. A woman who belonged. A woman who didn't bleed. I was catching up on emails when it happened. My inbox blinked with a new message, something forwarded by accident, or maybe not. The subject line stopped my breath cold. Uri. Possible media tie between Aurora Knight and one of our associates. I opened it before I could think. It was from the firm's PR consultant to my supervisor. A link to a gossip blog. A short paragraph. A warning. The art world's most elusive talent might not be so anonymous after all. Rumors are swirling that Aurora Knight has connections to the legal elite in Seattle. We've received anonymous tips citing suspicious overlaps in her show dates and a certain associate's absence. Investigating further. I froze. My skin went cold. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone was coming for me. I clicked out of the email and stood up slowly, legs unsteady. I scanned the room. People typing, answering phones, sipping coffee. Normal, ordinary. But someone in this building, had sold me out. I called Silas on my cell, stepping quickly into an empty office and shutting the door behind me. He answered on the first ring. "Silas, did you see it?" He exhaled hard. "Yeah, it's not good. Who tipped them?" He didn't hesitate. "Anonymous submission, but whoever it is, they did their homework. They cross-referenced Aurora Knight exhibit schedules with your firm calendar, canceled hearings, even pulled timestamps from public transportation logs. What the hell? This is surgical, Lyra. Whoever this is, they want you exposed. They want it loud." My heart pounded. There were only a handful of people who could have pulled something like this. Clara. Maybe Josh, though I doubted it. He was careless, not cruel. "I know who I'd bet on," I muttered. Silas was quiet, then said, "You need to start thinking about damage control." This story's not going away on its own. I ended the call and stood in silence, surrounded by frosted glass and the echo of betrayal. An hour later, I saw her in the break room. Clara was pouring coffee, scrolling her phone with one perfectly manicured hand. I walked in without hesitation. "Anything you want to share?" I said, voice flat. She looked up, smiling like I'd just asked for sugar. "Just coffee." I stepped closer. "If this is you, Clara, if you think I won't defend myself, think again." She tilted her head. "Defend yourself from what, exactly? A rumor? A few dots connected by bored bloggers?" I didn't blink. "Try me." Her smile widened. "I'd love to see that." And there it was. No denial, no fear, just the casual confidence of someone who thought she was holding the gun while I didn't even know I'd been shot. She walked past me slowly, deliberately, her perfume lingering like insult. I stood alone in the break room, heart racing. I had no proof. But I knew. I ignored 3 missed calls from my mother that night. I didn't want to hear another lecture, another veiled comment like, "Well, if you'd just stop trying to live 2 lives, Lyra, maybe one would work." Instead, I drove home and walked straight to the painting from 2 nights ago. The twisted courtroom, the bleeding scale, the silent woman. I picked up the black paint. Without hesitation, I dragged a thick stroke through the center, erasing the scales, drowning the silence. "You want war?" I whispered to the canvas. "You'll get art." If they wanted to uncover me, I'd make damn sure they choked on what they found. But I didn't expect the next move to come from my own side. The call came just after sunrise. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the voice immediately. Silas. "Lyra," he said, voice tight, like he was already bracing for my reaction. "You've been nominated. International Modern Arts Foundation. Top 5 emerging artists under 40. I sat up in bed. The sheets twisted around me like vines. "You're kidding." "I'm not. This is real, career-changing, global press, museum acquisition level serious." The silence on my end stretched, not because I didn't believe him, but because I knew what had to come next. "They want me there," I said. He hesitated. "Yeah, they're asking all 5 nominees to appear, in person. No pseudonyms, no masks. Press, cameras, panel interviews, full exposure." I closed my eyes. "They don't know who I am yet," I whispered. "No," he said. "But they will. It's only a matter of time." I got out of bed, barefoot on cold hardwood, and walked to the kitchen. Poured coffee with a shaking hand. "You could decline," Silas offered gently, "and confirm I'm hiding something." "You are hiding something." I didn't answer. I just stared at the coffee swirling in my cup like it had answers. By mid-morning, the office was humming with louder than usual chatter. I felt it in the way people glanced at me, in how their conversations paused when I passed by. I didn't need confirmation, but I got it anyway. Someone had taped something to the inside of the elevator wall. A photo of Aurora Knight. Well, a digitally rendered version. One of those AI-generated portraits of mysterious celebrities. Beside it, a cropped image of me from last year's gala. Underneath, in black Sharpie. Double exposure? I pulled it down, folded it once, and threw it in the trash. I didn't say a word. Not until Arthur Chamberlain, one of the senior partners, called me into his office. He closed the door. Saturday folded his hands. "You're aware of the noise surrounding your likeness and this artist." "Rumors," I said coolly. "Maybe, but you understand the optics. Our clients expect discretion, consistency, not anonymous moonlighting under an alias." He said alias like it was a crime. I didn't flinch. "My legal work has never been in question. This firm has a reputation to protect." I leaned forward. "So do I." He didn't smile. "You'll need to decide which name you want to keep. You can't be both." The room went still. I left without answering. That night, I went to my parents for dinner. The food was warm, the house colder than I remembered. Halfway through roasted chicken and bitter wine, my father spoke. "There's chatter at your firm. A girl pretending to be some paint slinger. Pathetic, really." I didn't look up from my plate. "And what if she's not pretending?" My mother froze mid-sip. My father raised an eyebrow, smirked. "Then she doesn't belong in law." There it was, the final line in the sand. The world as he saw it. You're either useful or you're noise. I didn't respond. I just finished eating, thanked them, left. On the walk home, the city blurred. Horns, footsteps, murmurs. I barely noticed any of it. I was lost in a conversation I hadn't finished. With myself. Back in my apartment, I dug out a blank canvas. And I painted. Not for critics, not for galleries, not even for Silas. This one was mine. One side showed a woman in a tailored navy suit, sharp, perfect posture. The other side? The same woman, barefoot, hands streaked with paint, wild eyes, open mouth, split, but standing. I titled it, "Split in Two, Standing Whole." If the world needed a name, then I'd give them mine. On my terms, the night came faster than I expected. Or maybe I just stopped running from it. The Seattle Art Museum was electric. People lined up in silk gowns and pressed suits, wine glasses glinting under the chandelier light. Whispers buzzed like bees. Tight, excited, impossible to contain. "They say she might show tonight. Do you think she's real? Or just a marketing stunt?" Aurora Knight. The mystery. The myth. I stood behind the curtain, in a dress I had painted by hand. Brushstroke by brushstroke, sleepless night after sleepless night. It wasn't just fabric, it was armor. My truth stitched in color. Silas found me seconds before showtime. He looked at me like a man standing in the eye of a hurricane. "Lyra, you don't have to do this." I smiled at him. "I do, and I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me." He exhaled. "They're out there. Press, critics, gallery owners, everyone who said you couldn't exist without a mask." "Let them look," I said. "I'm done hiding." The lights dimmed. A hush spread across the gallery floor like a wave receding before the storm. On stage, the museum director stepped up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor not just art, but the courage to reveal. For the first time ever, the artist known as Aurora Knight will appear in person." Gasps, murmurs, heads turning, then silence. I stepped out. The lights hit me all at once. So did the camera flashes. A dozen bulbs burst like fireworks, painting my face in bursts of white. I didn't flinch. "My name," I said into the microphone, voice steady, "is Lyra Wren. I am Aurora Knight." For a moment, the silence was perfect. Then, shouting, cameras clicking. A woman dropped her wine glass. Someone yelled, "Wait, you're her?" Another, louder, "You can't be both." I raised my chin. "Says who?" The noise grew louder. Reporters threw questions like darts. "How long have you been hiding this? Is your law firm involved? Are your paintings autobiographical?" But before I could answer any of them, I saw him. In the very back of the room. My father. Standing alone, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the massive painting behind me. Split in two, standing whole. He hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't returned a single call since that dinner. But there he was, and when our eyes locked, the whole room fell away. He walked forward. Slowly, deliberately. He stopped in front of the painting, studied it for what felt like hours. Then, without looking at me, he said, "So this is what you've been doing behind my back." I didn't hesitate. This is what I've been doing to survive you." His head turned then. His face was unreadable. "You lied." "No," I said. "I protected what was mine." His eyes narrowed. "You've humiliated yourself." My heart beat once, hard. "No," I said, louder now. "I've freed myself." There it was. Not a performance, not an explanation, just truth. I stepped down from the stage, my heels echoing through the stunned silence. I walked through the crowd like I had somewhere better to be. Because I did. Outside, the air was cold, clean, alive. I didn't look back. Let them call it a scandal. I called it liberation. But the cost of liberation has a way of showing up the very next morning, dressed in a suit, clutching paperwork. I arrived at Ravenhill to find a terse email waiting in my inbox. Emergency meeting, 9 a.m. boardroom. No subject, no details. I didn't need them. The boardroom was glass-walled, but emotionally bulletproof. Inside sat Arthur Chamberlain, 2 HR reps I barely knew, and legal counsel for the firm. On the table in front of them was a printed article. Lawyer by day, artist by night. The Double Life of Lyra Wren. A photo of me at the Seattle Art Museum stood frozen on the cover, flanked by camera flashes and the words scandal, identity, ethics. Arthur didn't smile. He didn't offer me a seat. "You've left us with no alternative," he said flatly. I sat anyway. One of the HR women slid a folder toward me. Neat, heavy, final. Arthur folded his hands. "We're all very impressed with your creative success, but this firm has built its reputation over decades of consistency, discretion, and alignment." I stared at the headline. I didn't touch the folder. "You've put us in a compromised position. Clients are calling. Some are reconsidering representation. We can't have confusion about where your loyalties lie." I raised my eyebrows. "So, what exactly are you asking me to do?" His tone never changed. "You must issue a formal statement disassociating yourself from the Aurora Knight persona. A full retraction, or you may resign. Effective immediately." "And if I do neither?" Arthur's jaw tensed. "Then we will terminate the partnership." The HR rep added gently, like she thought I might cry. "We're not punishing you, Lyra. We're protecting our brand." I laughed once, sharp and tired. "No, you're punishing my freedom." The legal counsel leaned forward. "The waiver is standard. You'll agree not to discuss the firm in the press, and in return, we'll classify your departure as voluntary, clean." I looked at the papers, then at each of their faces. Not one of them saw me. Not really. Just a name on a door. A liability. I stood. "Do you want to know the real scandal?" I said, my voice calm. "It's that I gave this firm everything I had, except the parts of me you never deserved." Arthur didn't reply. I left the folder on the table. No signature, just a name they could no longer control. I walked through the halls of Ravenhill one last time. My box was light, just a few files, a mug, and a plant I'd already forgotten to water. Some associates looked away. A few whispered. One even muttered, "Guess being famous doesn't pay rent." Clara stood by the elevators, sipping coffee with that same smug curve to her lips. She didn't say anything, neither did I. But as the elevator doors closed, I looked at her. "I gave you everything," I said, just loud enough. "But not all of me. That was your mistake." By the time I reached the parking garage, I wasn't crying. I was burning. I drove straight to my studio. No detours, no music, just rage. Focused, pure. I threw on a smock and didn't bother cleaning the dried paint on my arms from 2 nights ago. I grabbed a canvas, the biggest one I had, and pinned it to the wall. Then I picked up a brush and started without sketching, without rules. I painted a woman in a dark suit, no mouth again. But this time, her hands weren't bound. They were painting the walls around her. The walls looked like courtrooms, offices, boardrooms, and the walls were cracking. I called it gag order. It wasn't subtle, but then again, neither was betrayal. By the time I dropped the brush, I was shaking. But not weak, never that. They wanted me to choose, so I chose the truth, even if it cost me the world they built. But now that the fight had settled, what was left? The gallery buzz had quieted. The press had moved on to newer scandals. Even the hate mail slowed down. I'd won my right to exist on my own terms. Yet, beneath the victory, there was still this hollow ache that pulsed like a bruise. One evening, without thinking, I found myself driving through the old neighborhood, the one with the trimmed hedges and the forced smiles. I didn't call ahead. The porch light was off, but the kitchen window glowed softly. I knocked twice. My mother answered, wearing the same pearl earrings she always did when she wanted to seem more composed than she felt. "Lyra," she said, blinking, "you should have called." "Would you have let me in?" She didn't answer that. Just opened the door wider. The house looked the same. Too clean, too quiet. Like it was trying too hard to forget the people who lived in it. "He's not here," she said, leading me into the kitchen. "He's been distant." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "Is that your way of saying he regrets it, or that he's pretending it never happened?" She looked away. "You humiliated him." I freed myself. She winced at that, and I didn't apologize. Dinner was offered. I declined. Conversation stayed shallow. "How's the weather? Have I been eating? Is the art selling?" She didn't mention the gallery show, didn't ask about the paintings. I stood after 20 minutes. "I just wanted you to see me," I said, walking toward the door. "Why now?" "Because it's quieter now," I said, opening the door. "And sometimes that's the only time we actually hear anything." She didn't say goodbye. Back at the studio, I sat cross-legged in the middle of the floor, surrounded by canvases in various stages of chaos. None of them called to me. I picked up a brush anyway, not because I had something to say, but because silence is a language too. I didn't put on music, didn't pour wine. I just let my hand move, like muscle memory. Color bled into form. Form softened into rhythm. Hours passed. When I stepped back, I didn't even know what I'd painted. I didn't feel better, but I wasn't numb. That was enough. 3 days later, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope. No return address. Handwritten, neat, familiar. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no greeting, no date. "I don't understand the world you chose, but I finally understand why you had to choose it. I was wrong to believe my way was the only way. You didn't betray us. We betrayed you first." There was no signature, just that. I stared at the words for a long time. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it did. Because some part of me had been waiting for this for years and didn't know what to do with it now that it was real. I didn't call him, didn't frame the letter or tear it up. I tucked it between 2 pages of an old sketchbook and left it there. Not forgotten, not forgiven, just left. That night, I returned to my canvas. I painted something quiet. A man standing in shadow, one hand reaching toward a girl wrapped in light. No faces, no names, just the gesture. I called it Almost. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something softer than silence. A year passed like mist. I didn't mark the days with court filings or canvas deadlines anymore. My life no longer lived in halves. I wasn't Lyra at 9 and Aurora at midnight. I was just me, both, neither, more. The invitation went out on a Tuesday. You are cordially invited to Two Names, One Life, a solo exhibition by Lyra Wren, formerly known as Aurora Knight. Beneath that, one simple line. Come see what remains when a life is told whole. The gallery was small, local, no international press, no Fashion Week collectors. Just wood floors, white walls, and the truth. Mine. I stood near the door as people trickled in. Familiar faces, unfamiliar eyes. Some knew me as the fiery debater from law school, others as the ghost painter who refused to be photographed. Some didn't know who I was at all. That was the beauty of it. Silas stood at my side, grinning like a proud brother. You nervous? Not anymore, I said. I already lived the worst of it. This part is easy. When it came time to speak, I didn't use a mic. The space was intimate. My voice didn't need to be loud to carry. I used to think I had to choose, I told the crowd. Be a daughter or an artist, a lawyer or a rebel. Wear the mask or break it. I looked around, at canvases titled Gag Order, Almost, Split in Two, Standing Whole. But healing doesn't come from breaking things, it comes from becoming whole. This is what it looks like when you stop asking for permission to be yourself. They clapped, not loud, but honest. Later that night, I wandered the floor. My old law professor stopped me. His eyes were glassy. I always wondered why your arguments felt lyrical, he said. Now I know. Even Josh, my former assistant, showed up. He hugged me too long and said, Your paintings punch harder than your depositions ever did. But the biggest surprise? Arthur Chamberlain, standing by Gag Order, hands in his pockets. You cost us a headline scandal, he said without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. And, he added, you taught the firm something. About courage, about the value of not fitting inside the damn mold. I almost smiled. Almost. At the very end of the night, I spotted him. My father. He stood in the back, near the exit. He didn't come forward, didn't speak, but he stayed. He looked at Almost for a long time, his face unreadable, arms at his sides, not folded like they always were in judgment. And when the lights dimmed, he was still there. He nodded once when I passed him. That was all. It was more than enough. In the months that followed, I started teaching a few classes at a community art school, just part-time, just enough to remind me that creation isn't always solitary. I also launched a small foundation, modest, private, quiet. For kids like me, the ones told that their dreams were distractions, that their gifts were impractical. I didn't tell them to rebel, I told them to become whole. The gallery kept one piece at the front entrance, a mirror, framed in walnut, etched with my handwriting. Your story doesn't need permission to be yours. Sometimes I'd catch people reading it with their hands on their chests, like something had landed deep inside. That's what I wanted all along. Not applause, not revenge, just understanding. Back at my studio one evening, I found the painting I had sworn I'd never touch again. My father's verdict. It was still jagged, still raw. A courtroom filled with red. A scale bent toward silence. I didn't repaint it. I just added one thing. My signature. My real name. I was never hiding. I was just waiting for the world to catch up. And if you're still watching, maybe something in my story resonated with yours. I used to believe success meant fitting in, that to be loved, I had to choose one version of myself and silence the rest. But I've learned something far more powerful. Wholeness isn't about choosing between your truths. It's about claiming all of them, even the ones that don't make sense to anyone else. Maybe you're watching this right now, feeling stuck in a life someone else chose for you. Maybe you've buried a dream so deep you don't even say it out loud anymore. I've been there, and I can promise you, there is no peace in pretending, only pressure, only performance. The real power begins the day you stop apologizing for who you are. You don't need to burn your life down to start over. Sometimes all it takes is one brushstroke of honesty. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you were living two lives just to survive? Have you ever been told you had to choose between your passion and your obligations? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this video hit you somewhere real, type 1 in the chat. Or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't, that's okay too. Tell me why. Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories like this, true, raw, human stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter. You're not alone, not anymore. And your story? It matters.